Chapter 101. Mr. Jevons said that I liked maths because it was safe. He said I liked maths because it meant solving problems, and these problems were difficult and interesting, but there was always a straightforward answer at the end. And what he meant was that maths wasn't like life, because in life there are no straightforward answers at the end. I know he meant this because this is what he said. This is because Mr. Jevons doesn't understand numbers. Here's a famous story called the Monty Hall Problem, which I've included in this book because it illustrates what I mean. There used to be a column called Ask Marilyn in a magazine called Parade in America. And this column was written by Marilyn Vos Savant. And in the magazine, it said that she had the highest IQ in the world in the Guinness Book of World Records Hall of Fame. And in the column, she answered math questions sent in by readers. And in September 1990, this question was sent in by Craig F. Whitaker in Columbia, Maryland. But it is not what is called the direct quote because I have made it simpler and easier to understand. You're on a game show on television. On this game show, the idea is to win a car as a prize. The game show host shows you 3 doors. He says there's a car behind one of the doors, and there are goats behind the other 2 doors. He asks you to pick a door. You pick a door, but the door is not opened. Then the game show host opens one of the doors you didn't pick to show a goat, because he knows what is behind the doors. Then he says you have one final chance to change your mind before the doors are open, and you get a car or a goat. So we ask you if you want to change your mind and pick the other unopened door instead. What should you do? Marilyn Vos Savant said you should always change and pick the final door because the chances are 2 in 3 that there will be a car behind that door. But if you use your intuition, you think that chance is 50-50 because you think there's an equal chance that the car is behind any door. Lots of people wrote to the magazine to say that Marilyn Vos Savant was wrong, even when she explained very carefully why she was right. Of the letters she got about the problem, 92 said that she was wrong, and lots of them were from mathematicians and scientists. Here are some of the things they said. I'm very concerned with the general public's lack of mathematical skills. Please help by confessing your error. Robert Sachs, PhD, George Mason University. And there's enough mathematical illiteracy in this country, and we don't need the world's highest IQ propagating more. Shame. Scott Smith, PhD, University of Florida. I am in shock that after being corrected by at least 3 mathematicians, you still do not see your mistake. Kent Ford, Dickinson State University. I am sure you will receive many letters from high school and college students. Perhaps you should keep a few addresses for help with future columns. W. Robert Smith, PhD, Georgia State University. You are utterly incorrect. How many irate mathematicians are needed to get you to change your mind? L. Ray Bobo, PhD, Georgetown University. If all those PhDs were wrong, the country would be in very serious trouble. Everett Harmon, PhD, U.S. Army Research Institute. But Marilyn Vos Savant was right, and here are 2 ways you can show this. Firstly, you can do it by maths, like this. Let the doors be called X, Y, and Z. Let C, X, be the event that the car is behind door X, and so on. Let H, X, be the event that the host opened doors X, and so on. Supposing that you chose door X, the possibility that you win a car if you then switch your choice is given by the following formula. I'm not going to read that long formula, but it's there. The second way you can work it out is by making a picture of all the possible outcomes like this. So if you change 2 times out of 3, you get a car. And if you stick, you only get a car 1 time out of 3. And this shows that intuition can sometimes get things wrong. And intuition is what people use in life to make decisions. But logic can help you work out the right answer. It also shows that Mr. Jevons was wrong, and numbers are sometimes very complicated and not very straightforward at all. And that is why I like the Monty Hall problem. Chapter 103. When I got home, Rhodri was there. Rhodri is the man who works for Father, helping him to do heating maintenance and boiler repair. And he sometimes comes round to the house in the evening to drink beer with Father and watch the television and have a conversation. Rotary was wearing a pair of white dungarees, which had dirty marks all over them, and he had a gold ring on the middle finger of his left hand, and he smelled something I do not know the name of, which Father often smells of when he comes home from work. I put my licorice laces and my Milky Bar in my special food box on the shelf, which Father is not allowed to touch because it is mine. Then Father said, "And what have you been up to, young man?" And I said, "I went to the shop to get some licorice laces and a Milky Bar." And he said, "You were a long time." And I said, "I talked to Mrs. Alexander's dog outside the shop, and I stroked him, and he sniffed my trousers," which was another white lie. Then Rotary said to me, "God, you do get the third degree, don't you?" But I didn't know what the third degree was. And he said, "So how are you doing, Captain?" And I said, "I'm doing very well, thank you," which is what you're meant to say. And he said, "What's 251 times 864? And I thought about this, and I said, 216,864. Because it's really easy sum, because you just multiply 864 by 1,000, which is 864,000. Then you divide it by 4, which is 216,000. And that's 250 times 864. And then you just add another 864 onto it to get 251 times 864. And that's 216,864. And I said, "Is that right?" And Rotary said, "I haven't got a bloody clue." And he laughed. I don't like it when Rotary laughs at me. Rotary laughs at me a lot. Father said it's being friendly. And Father said, "I'll stick one of those gobi aloo sag things in the oven for you, okay?" This is because I like Indian food because it has a strong taste. But gobi aloo sag is yellow. So I put red food coloring into it before I eat it. And I keep a little plastic bottle of this in my special food box. And I said, "Okay." And Rotary said, "So it's looked like Parky stitched them up then." But this was to Father and not to me. And Father said, "Well, those circuit boards looked like they'd come out of the bloody ark." Rotary said, "You going to tell them?" And Father said, "What's the point? They're hardly going to take him to court, are they?" And Rotary said, "That'll be the day." And Father said, "Best to let sleeping dogs lie, I reckon." Then I went into the garden. Siobhan said that when you're writing a book, you have to include some descriptions of things. I said I could take photographs and put them in the book, but she said the idea of a book was to describe things using words so that people could read them and make a picture in their own head. And she said it was best to describe things that were interesting or different. She also said I should describe people in the story by mentioning one or two details about them so that people could make a picture of them in their head, which is why I wrote about Mr. Jevons' shoes with all the holes in them, and the policeman who looked as if he had 2 mice in his nose, and the thing Rotary smelled of but I didn't know the name for. So I decided to do a different description of the garden, but the garden wasn't very interesting or different. It was just a garden with grass and a shed and a clothesline. But the sky was interesting and all different because usually skies look boring because they're all blue or all gray or all covered in one pattern of clouds, and they don't look like they're hundreds of miles above your head. They look like someone might have painted them on a big roof. But this sky had a lot of different shapes of clouds in it at different heights, so you could see how big it was, and this made it look enormous. Furthest away in the sky were little white clouds which looked like fish scales or sand dunes, which had a very regular pattern. The next furthest away to the west were some big clouds which were colored slightly orange because it was nearly evening and sun was going down. Then closest to the ground was a huge cloud which was colored gray because it was a rain cloud. It was a big pointy shape and it looked like this. When I looked at it for a long time, I could see it moving very slowly, and it was like an alien spaceship hundreds of kilometers long, like in Dune or Blake 7 or Close Encounters of the Third Kind, except for that it wasn't made of solid material. It was made of droplets of condensed water vapor, which is what clouds are made of. But it could have been an alien spaceship. People think that alien spaceships would be solid and made of metal and have lights all over them and move slowly through the sky, because that's how we would build the spaceship if we were able to build one, that is. But aliens, if they exist, would probably be very different than us. They might look like big slugs, or be flat like reflections, or they might be bigger than planets, or they might not have bodies at all. They might just be information, like in a computer. Their spaceships might look like clouds, or be made up of unconnected objects like dust or leaves. Then I listened to the sounds in the garden, and I could hear a bird singing, and I could hear traffic noise, which was like the surf on a beach, and I could hear someone playing music somewhere and children shouting. And in between all these noises, if I listened very carefully and stood completely still, I could hear a tiny whining noise inside my ear and the air going in and out of my nose. Then I sniffed the air to see if I could see what the air in the garden smelled like. But I couldn't smell anything. I smelled of nothing. And this was interesting too. Then I went inside and fed Toby.